Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It is Friday at 10:28. So yeah, I today's my first day of school vacation. We are on spring break, I guess, if you want to call it that, from school. So I got a bunch of time off. So pretty excited. Gonna just get some practicing in and relaxing. I got a few gigs coming up and just chilling out, watching movies and all those good things. I'm really excited. Tonight I'm going to go with some friends to go see a new movie I've heard a lot of really good things about, and I'm actually really excited to see it. Fingers crossed it's good because this year 2025 has been a pretty shitty year as far as new movies go. It's been really disappointing and underwhelming compared to last year 2024, which was an awesome year. So, but we're gonna go see Sinners, which is a newer. It's actually opening tonight, and I've heard some really good things about it. It's apparently a vampire movie, but I've read a little bit about it. I've seen a little bit of coverage of this film, but I've been trying to stay away from it. I haven't even really watched the trailer, so I'm excited. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to see it tonight, and then definitely stay tuned for a review. The reviews for this movie. There's a bunch of reviews now, all on YouTube. It's tonight, I do believe, which is Friday, is the opening night. So all of the YouTubers out there have been posting videos, reviews for this channel, for their channels, and I've generally taken a little bit of a you know put my feelers out there and to see what the some of the folks are saying, and if there's any kind of buzz around it or excitement around this film, because we really need a good film right now. I think it's in a weird place. Films are in a weird place right now as far as new movies go. The only movie I saw this year that I really liked was The Monkey by Osgood Perkins. I really liked that movie a lot. He's a great director. He did Long Legs last year, and then Blackcoat's Daughter, which I haven't seen before that. And then he has another new movie coming out. He's a really exciting, crazy director, crazy, wacky style, real interesting, kind of blends multiple genres all at once. I really love his work. So, but I saw The Monkey about, which is based on a Stephen King story, or Stephen King book. That came out probably like a couple of months ago. That was the last time I went to the movie, so it's been pretty dismal this year. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. Maybe it's good. Maybe it'll be okay. Maybe it will be awesome. We'll see. But I will. I usually, whenever I go to the movies, I always, whether the movie's really great or not very good or what have you, regardless of what I feel about the movie, I always do a review of it. So I typically try to stay pretty positive on this channel as far as reviews go. I typically only cover movies that I'm really excited about, and I don't do the you know the the whole thing as far as ranting and trashing movies. Where people use it as bait to kind of get people to their channel, and they want to have a throwdown about a movie, how shitty they think it was, and they do it just because they are trying to get hits. And I understand that, but there's a lot of bullshit on the internet because of that. I just try to approach it from just being a fan, and just what that experience is like, or what the experience was like when I saw that movie. So, but I make an exception to the rule, as far as most of the reviews that I do are centered on movies that I own. And so, and I typically, keep it on the focus of movies that I love. But whenever I go to the theater, I'll do a show or a review of that film regardless. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited to see it tonight, and then I'll probably be doing a show this weekend about it. So very, very excited. And so the other new thing I'm going to be doing with this channel, well, as far as like I'm always trying to bring some variety. I've been doing a lot of music shows, and then along with the typical reviews of films. I did a big show yesterday. I uploaded it yesterday on this band that I really, really love. I think they're one of the coolest and one of the most exciting bands around right now, Imperial Triumphant. So check that out. That's been up. So I appreciate, the new folks that have been subscribing to this page, and also a lot of folks that have been commenting on these videos. I love that. It's all about that cool interaction. And one of the things I'm going to do, or I should say, one of the things I'm working towards doing is I want to do shows on where I'm going to just kind of focus on some of these boutique labels that are out there, because there's so many fantastic labels that are putting out just amazing films. And I haven't really done that. I think I've done two shows. I did one big show on Mondo Macabro, which is my favorite label. And I think I did a show on Blue Underground. I'm not sure. I have to actually double check. Sometimes I lose I forget where I left off, or if I covered a particular thing or not. But I know I did something. I did a video on Mondo Macabre really recently. So I want to do more shows on where I'm going to just talk about certain labels that are out there, because there's, if you're a collector and a film fanatic, and you like or love physical media like I do, it's the best time to be alive. So today's show is going to be on one of the greatest and one of the best and one of the most important boutique labels out there, and that is going to be Severn. So I'm going to be talking about Severn today. Talk about, a little bit on how I discovered them and some of the movies that I own from this company. So yeah, this will be fun. So yeah, Severin. I mean, there's so many great labels to talk about. Again, I did a show on Mondo Macabre recently, and then I believe I did one on Blue Underground. I have to double check. But Mondo Macabre is my favorite. I really, really love Blue Underground. Blue Underground has a special place in my heart, because the founder of Blue Underground, William Luswig, is just was an amazing director in the world of exploitation. He directed my favorite slasher movie of all time, which again I want to revisit it and do another big show on it at some point, and that is Maniac. Love that fucking movie. That movie's a masterpiece. It's my favorite slasher movie of all time. And so, but along with those two labels, you have Severin, which is today's topic. Severin is just an amazing label. I have a shit ton of films. Lately, I've been buying a lot of Giallo films that they've been putting out. And again, they really focus on all things exploitation. It's their transfers for their films are just impeccable. The quality is amazing. I discovered them. I discovered Severin. I started buying when I started getting really into buying Blu-rays, which was probably about 7 years ago. And it was probably when I moved into buying more and more exploitation movies was about 5 years ago. And that's how I discovered Severin. They've been around for a long time. So Severin was founded in 2006 by David Gregory, Carl Draft, and John Cregan. They specialize in, again, just all kinds of whacked out shit. Grindhouse films, art house films, movies that were at one time, completely forgotten. Russ Meyer these are some of the filmmakers and some of the films, some of the directors. So many great directors that have been around for decades, but especially like during the time of the exploitation, heyday at its height. Some of the films and directors that they've put out a lot of their films. Mike Lee, Lucio Fulci, of course, probably my favorite. Well, Lucio Fulci is my favorite exploitation director. I've done multiple shows on him as a director and covered a shit ton of his films. And I believe all of the Lucio Fulci movies that I own are all pretty much through Severin. There's a couple of Mondo Macabra films, Lucio Fulci films, and a few other different labels, but most of the Lucio Fulci films are from Severin. And again, the thing about them is the packaging is incredible. The artwork that they use, there's always tons of special features. If you're a film fanatic fan and you generally love these films, I from my perspective, when I'm into a movie, I kind of want to see how these things, these ideas were brought to film, and what started the idea, the whole process, the marketing, the director's or the screenwriter's inspiration. I'm a huge fan, massive fan of practical effects. That's where it's at. So I love to see how all of those things were created, because you know this was in the age and time before green screen and eventually CGI. So things are, and it's funny because I think more and more films now, a lot of the great films that came out last year, 2024, even for like bigger budget Hollywood films, I think things kind of have a cycle for them a lot of the times, and I feel like there's been a bigger interest, and I've seen it more and more in a lot more of say more modern day horror films, contemporary horror films, where there's like kind of a return and a resurgence and a deep interest in going back to the use of imagination and creativity as far as practical effects. Well, one example I think is In a Violent Nature, which is an awesome slasher movie that came out last year. I saw it on DVD, and then I watched it again. I rented it, and then I bought it on Blu-ray, and I've seen it multiple times. Really awesome slasher movie that harkens back to the whole grindhouse world, but it's got some of the greatest and most gnarly kills that I've ever seen in a film, and it's all practical effects. And I just think that's amazing and awesome that stuff is coming back around. And it's just it's incredible. They cover Indonesian films. They put out a lot of Severin puts out a lot of Indonesian films, documentaries, even comedies. They have a huge variety. Bruno Mattei, one of the greatest Italian directors. Al Adamson, another amazing director. Andy Milligan, Joe D'Amato, Claudia Fragasso, another amazing Italian director. And of course, Jess Franco, the legendary Spanish director. And I probably have about 40 or so titles from Severin at this point. And I you can't go wrong. I'm at a point, and I've said this in regards to as a fan and as a collector and just through experience. When I see a film now in the store at Bull Moose, and I see a Mondo Mercaba title, I just scoop it up. I don't even if I don't own it, I just usually just buy it. And virtually every film that I've bought from, pretty much every film I have gotten from Mondo Macabra, are all films I've never seen. So it's pretty unique. I have a unique kind of relationship with that whole label because they're just so damn good. But Severn, it's a little bit more mixed because a lot of those films, or I should say, there's definitely a good percentage of those films that I saw, when I was a kid. A lot of the older Italian films, I did see. I was exposed to the films of Bruno Mattei. I saw a lot of those films when I was a kid. Films of Bruno Mattei, of course, Dario Argento, Lucio Fulci, Mario Bava. I saw a lot of those films when I was a kid, but at the same time, you know, I have had not seen those movies since I was a kid, so it was like virtually, you know, seeing them for the first time again, and seeing them on Blu-ray and having a completely new and fresh experience, and that's really due to Severn's, brilliance. So one of the greatest labels, and I'm pretty much at the same place, even though like Mono Macabre is my favorite. I'm pretty much at the same place now with Severin. If I see a title, any movie, because I have so many of Severin titles, I'm at a point now. If I see a Severin movie in the shop, I, you know, will buy it, and if I don't own it, I'll just snag it up because I know it's probably gonna be a home run. It's probably gonna be pretty awesome, and it's pretty. I feel, as a fan, as a movie fan, film fanatic, and then as a consumer of physical media, I have enough of their titles at this point that I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be awesome. So I will buy a lot of the times I will buy their titles without having seen them. But there are a lot of films that they are putting out or have put out that I did see when I was a kid. So there's a little bit of a difference. But all in all, it's amazing and so incredibly worth it. It's interesting, my perspective around physical media and a lot of these labels, and you know, with covering and really, really, it's again, it's a genre that I've always loved. I've always had a deep connection to, but over the last 5 years, I've just really fallen in love with it to where it's become my favorite genre. Of course, the world of exploitation and all of those things that entails. But ever since a young age, seeing movies like The Tourist Trap, which is my favorite of all time in the genre, done multiple shows on that. I'll probably do more, and a shit ton of other films. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, House by the Cemetery, Suspiria, so movies that I used to watch all the time as a kid, and then later on rediscovering them again and then buying them on Blu-ray and realizing, holy shit, there's this, you know, renaissance, like this explosion that suddenly, all these movies that I saw as a kid on, late night cable shows, or, and then during the time of VHS, which I'm a product of that, seeing them on the shelves as a little kid, and getting these tapes, and then but then there was this kind of like weird time where it felt like after, I guess the transition from VHS to DVD, it felt like there was this, like a lot of those movies kind of just disappeared. It was really weird. Like when I got into college, when I was in college, I really got into film. I started to really get into certain directors, and started to find myself, when DVDs started coming out, that's when I started buying movies, and I started my kind of early stage of being a collector. And that was, in my mid to late 20s or so, and when I was in college, out of college, And then for quite a few years, the DVD revolution kicked in and it just exploded. But a lot of those movies, that I mentioned before that I saw as a kid were, well, at least for me, and I think for other people, they they kind of went into obscurity. Like you didn't hear about those movies anymore. I didn't see them anywhere. I didn't see them being released on DVD. And they just kind of went further into the murky depths. They were kind of this weird distant memory. But then, when I discovered all of these, labels, Severin, one of the most notably, suddenly it was like, holy shit, all of these weird fucking super low budget movies are coming back. And it was probably about 5 years ago that I became a fanatic as far as buying these movies. And I couldn't believe what was being re-released. And now we're getting them on 4K. It's just, it's insane. But it was going so fast and furious. And I started, that's when things started turning big time with the industry and, with music, with physical media. A lot of people were going strictly digital with streaming content, and less and less, movie theaters were hit hard because of COVID, and a lot less people were going to movies, which is still a big thing now. All of these things are happening, and then you had all these streaming companies putting out movies and all of this stuff, and so it was like the whole landscape was changing. But as far as a collector for movies, I was still like, gung ho buying movies and just being amazed by what I was seeing coming out and what I was buying. And then, I started seeing that, or getting this feeling like physical media is going to go away. And I started to have this sense of urgency as a buyer for these films, because I'm like, wow, these movies this is like some crazy, just an insane, insanely amazing period in history right now. So, but it's not gonna. I had this feeling like it's not gonna last. So that just increased my appetite to buy even more movies. And so, and I kept hearing more and more stories that, you know, these things, physical media as we know it, was going to go away. And I was like, wow, this could be inevitable. And I remember, like, there was a big thing where when it was announced, when Best Buy was going to basically do away with their whole physical media offering, with all the movies that they would sell. Because when I first became a collector, I first started buying DVDs. That was a big place I used to go, was Best Buy, and I used to buy a shit ton of movies there, and they had an amazing selection at that time. But I remember when physical media really took a hit a few years back, and it was announced that they were doing away with it, I saw this ripple effect, and I saw other places suddenly not selling DVDs anymore or Blu-rays, and I, saw interviews with people who run a lot of these boutique labels talking about how, it's possibly inevitable, it's going to go away. And I started seeing, like, in places that I would go, particularly in Bull Moose, where a lot of these titles weren't really available anymore. And I was like, holy shit. And I saw this kind of decline. But then, within the last two years or so, now I've seen this uptick, this big, huge upsurge. And now, from being a buyer of these movies, I see more and more titles available. So it's kind of amazing. And Severn being one of the titans out there pushing these, these little underground, disgusting little movies. So it's great. It's great. I hope it keeps going. I will always support it. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.